Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it.
It's the one I use for voiceover all the time.
Yeah, me too.
It's stationary at the desk.
Voiceover. Voiceover. Are you guys like professionals?
Yeah. Well, you know.
I should have a podcast or something and interview you guys. That would be
an idea.
What a great idea. Well, you know what? It works out perfectly because 20 seconds ago I turned on the recorder and we're already doing it. So turn off your camera there, Ron, because we don't need to look each other. It's only audio.
I see how you are.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. See, now I get to see RTNT.
Yeah, and I know you love my R and my RTNT. So
I'm telling you, I really struggled wearing that shirt in Kansas City for a day. I love your video.
That's my dyslexia off.
Yeah. I love your videos. I love being friends with you. But wearing that backwards R for a day in Kansas City, really, it was a struggle. It really was. Do you have one of those shirts, Steve?
I do not have one of those shirts.
Yeah. I had to. It was a long story. I had to beg for it, but then I made him wear mine, so it was perfect.
It worked out. There's an entire line of them available on my YouTube channel now, including hoodies, sweatshirts, and the entire Ron's Trains and Things gear line.
The swag.
That's right.
All right, so I'll introduce you. We've been talking for like days, an hour, a minute and a half, and there's been no introductions. I had my podcast reviewed by a really nice guy that I used to help me with podcast problems. But he has a review show. A couple of really nice guys, but they said one of the problems was I didn't introduce people, and I said, well, I already knew who they were.
Yeah. I'm like
introducing to who? I didn't know anybody was listening. All right. So this is episode probably about 120-ish in that area. It's probably right around the end of March, the beginning of April, middle of April. And we're going to interview Stephen Atwell, who I keep hearing he has Midwest Trains, and my friend Ron Marsh, who's co-hosting with me tonight, kept saying, you got to talk to Stephen Atwell. And I'm like, all right, already. So, Steve, you better be good, because Ron...
Yeah.
I
would say Steve's not that interesting.
Well, according to Ron, you're like one of the most interesting guys in the hobby, so you better be.
Well, he's fascinating to me, but I'm pretty easily entertained.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that should work out perfect. You and I were worried about I think you and I would make a couple of good monkeys in the circus. So, Stephen Atwell of Midwest Trains. Ron,
Midwest Model Railroad.
Midwest Model Railroad, and you also you live in Kansas City, do you not?
I actually I live in New York City.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
All right. That's right off the bat. We're confused because Ron was telling me when we were at some point when we were talking that in Kansas City Ron, did you not go to some soiree that Stephen was having?
A soiree. That's exactly right. But you're confusing where Stephen lives and where Stephen's from. So.
Oh, okay. All right. So Midwest Model Railroad, did you say?
Yes.
It's actually out of New York, but it's.
So Midwest Model Railroad is based in Kansas City. My family, my father and mother and siblings still live in Kansas City, but my other life has me living in New York.
Oh, that's right. Ron told me about that. You're an ocean boat racer.
That is correct. They only blow up every other time.
Okay, so is this a family business or something? This Midwest Model Railroad?
Yeah, we started back in 2011 or 2012 It kind of started as a hobby almost between my father and I.
Okay.
There was a massive lack of in-scale options in Kansas City, and building a new layout it was difficult to find the things that we wanted without having to shop all over the place to find the options. So we decided to open up sort of a in-scale only shop initially, and it's since branched out into in and HO mostly. But we wanted a place that in-scalers could go and find a lot of detail parts that they might not find anywhere else, and be able to build a cart together without having to shop at 5 or 6 different places.
Okay, so this leads right perfectly into a question that Ron has heard me ask many, many times. Is N-Scale dead?
It is not dead.
Okay. It runs so well now. Oh my God! Like is it growing?
In-scale is growing as house sizes are starting to scale back to more family units versus everyone wanting their own home and everyone. Like I'm in my 30s and I have no idea that I enjoy living alone most of the time, but I have no problem with having a roommate. So I have a second bedroom that I have a roommate in more often than not anymore.
Okay, so you just limited. So you're thinking, and that's a good point. That as more and more people have limited space, N-Scale's going to continue to fill a void.
Yeah, it's nice because New York rent is obviously expensive, and I managed to have a small layout here in my apartment in New York that at least keeps me active in the hobby.
Okay, and Ron, feel free to jump in whenever, buddy.
Okay, will do.
I feel like I got 2 stars of the hobby here. I got Ron Marsh, whose YouTube channel is growing like at rapid pace. Like, I wonder if Ron's going to still talk to me in a couple of years.
Well, you've got to talk to your cameraman and keep him happy. So we'll still be talking.
So is this a store, Steve?
So we started out as an internet-only situation, and as we've grown, it's turned into we're at a crossroads now of deciding what to do with the next chapter. Right now, we've outgrown the space because it was inside of my parents' home. The space, we've managed to find more space every time we keep saying there's no more space. We managed to find a little bit more. And recently the guest bedroom went away and is now full of shelving. But we're at a crossroads now where they're a little bit busting at the seams, and we need to make a decision if we're going to move into a warehouse type situation or a retail type situation.
And so it's you and your dad. It's primarily you and your dad.
Yes.
And you guys just started this. So what? Like you said, 2008?
2011, I believe.
Okay, so for 7 years, and now already you've grown to such a point where you're busting at the seams, and you got to figure out what to do next.
Yeah, we've established ourselves I went to business school, and it's in me. I'm extremely financially conservative anyway, so every corner we make and every decision we make, I make based on finances over everything else.
Right.
So we've done an incredibly good job of keeping all of our overhead low and all of our expenses low. And in doing so, we just decide to pass all that savings on to the customer, which means we're gaining more and more customers because our prices are set right for people to actually enter the hobby and enjoy the hobby without breaking the bank.
Well, that's an excellent point. So we'll come back to this because this is cool. Ron, it looks like you were like right on, buddy. So let's go back to the beginning then. Your dad was a model railroader?
Yeah, I was born in Rolla, Missouri, and we had a house there. And we were there until second grade, I think. And I don't remember specifics, but there was an HO scale layout in one half the basement. And as far as I remember, my memories of it made it out to be this massive thing, but I've seen that house since, because my grandparents still live down the street from it. I have seen that house since, and knowing from the outside of the house that basement could not have been as large as my mind had made it.
Yeah.
So I grew up with my father having a layout that he was building with what I believe is friends from town, or I think my uncle was part of working on it, and it was a project thing, and it was a group activity. and then he set me up with a small 4x8 layout on the other side of the basement so that, I didn't tear up his stuff.
That's pretty cool, though. You know what? I think that's a pretty cool point. When you're younger, like my first exposure to model railroading was in Toronto. There's a very famous model railroad store called George's Trains. And my very first exposure to model railroading was before George had his store. I must have been like 6 or 7. We went to his house. And while my dad and him were discussing whatever it was my dad was buying at the time, he turned on the layout and let a locomotive and a caboose run around. And I remember the layout as being 60 by 80.
Yeah.
But it was probably more like 10 by 10. But you're right. Like, yeah, I wonder how many people, and so many people fall in love with the hobby when they're younger. And I wonder if that's part of it, because when you're younger, it just seems so much more. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. I can look at that room now and mentally tell myself that that room is probably 16 by 24, because right. I can picture the layout, and I know the space that's required to do the things that were on the layout, and it's in my mind it was this massive football field of a room, which in reality, looking back, was probably less than around 300 square feet.
Right. Yeah. But it made such an impact on you. You fell in love with the hobby, like so many people do, and off you went.
Yeah, it was interesting. We moved a few times when I was a kid. So after 3rd grade, my father's trains went away and never came out of the box. And I did a couple modeling type projects for school when I was in high school, but nothing into model trains. And then I was in college, and it was like 2 or 3 years in college, and I noticed that there was a model train store in Springfield, Missouri. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to go in there and look around. And next thing I knew, I was walking out with equipment and stuff. And I was like, oh, I guess this is a thing. I had made no decisions other than I was going to go look at a model train store because I remember it from my childhood.
Right.
And next thing I knew, I was an inscaler.
Yeah, you're basically a model railroader all your life. Like, that's what's so cool about the hobby. Like that doing the podcast, Ron. I mean, we've talked about this. The thing that has made the podcast so cool for me is the connections I've made with people, and seeing like the hobby's like way bigger than I ever realized. Right.
Yeah. I think that's very true. I know with the channel, of course, that's part of why I started, my YouTube channel too, is I was real isolated geographically from other modelers and just wanted to have an opportunity to kind of make some connections with some other people. And boy, has that happened. I mean, the world of YouTube and social media, well, that's, Lionel, that's how we met, and Steven, that's how we met. And so many other just really, really good friends that I've made over the last year and a half, just because, they were out there, and through the wonder of social media, I was able to find them.
So how did you two guys find each other, Steven?
Eric Hall introduced Ron and I when Ron was hosting the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest Part 1.
Okay.
And they asked me if I wanted to be involved, and that's where Ron and I met. And then the first time I actually ever met Ron in person was, I think, probably the day before you met him in person.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
And have you recovered yet, or?
I had to leave the state.
Lionel had to leave the country.
Yeah, I left the country. Yeah. Like I just drove right. I just started driving north as fast as I could. So what was it you were doing in Kansas City then? Because the convention was there, and your dad and you have the business based out of Kansas City. Where, like, does your dad live right? Your parents live right in Kansas City, or in the outskirts, or?
They live in Kansas City proper, but if you were to drive a car from where they live and try to get downtown, you'd have to drive through 3 other cities to get there.
Okay.
Because how Kansas City acquired land. So they're really in a suburb, and it's the suburb that I went to high school in, Lee Summit. And so while the national convention came up, I went to Kansas City because I had some time off of work here. So I went there to do day-to-day at the store, making sure everything got in and out while he attended the convention.
Okay. And did people come by your place? Like, did you make it so that people could come by and?
Yeah, we had I believe you called it a soiree. We had a barbecue one of the first couple nights there with an operating session, and people could sit and hang out and talk about trains, or they could browse through the store if they wanted to, and they had the opportunity to run trains on the layout that's at that house.
Okay. All right. And so it wasn't necessarily, was it at your parents' house? Like your dad has a layout again now, or?
He does have a layout again now. So back in like 2010, he was working overseas, and he had been home a couple times, and I'd gone back to Kansas City when he was home. He was there for a couple weeks at a time. And every time I go to town, I would want to go to the hobby shop just to kind of go look through the hobby shops. And it got to a point within maybe the second time that I was home, he was leaving the hobby shop with more things than I was leaving the hobby shop with. He'd walk out with an armload of books, and I'd walk out with some track pieces that I was having difficulty finding, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So pretty quickly, I was like, "Are you interested in trains again? Like, do you want a layout? Like, there's space in your house. You could have a layout. Maybe there's just some work that needs to be done in order to establish that." And so over the course of me traveling, him overseas, we designed a layout via email back and forth with each other for one of the rooms in the downstairs of that house. And then I had a couple weeks off from work, and I flew back to Kansas City and built the bench work for that layout with my mother and my brother so that he could start working on the layout proper when he got home and didn't have to concern himself with bench work.
So your mother and your brother, well, actually, I think I should say it this way, your brother and your mother?
Yes. They helped me build the bench work for the layout the first layout that was in that room. That layout eventually went away, and
right, yeah.
We're on the second layout.
Well, that's pretty cool that your mom was getting involved too.
Yeah.
So she a fan of the hobby or a fan of the business, or?
She is active in the business. I don't know that she's a fan of the hobby, but she does not dislike the hobby.
Right.
She's absolutely tolerant of the hobby being in the house, as long as, it stays in its lane.
Yeah.
There's the key.
Yeah, there's the key. Yeah. Don't be wandering outside your lane. That's a good one. That's cool that she helped you build the benchwork though. So, what would she do? Like just, cutting boards or screwing it together or what?
She definitely helped with the assembly. I fancy myself a bit of a carpenter myself anyway, so I did all of the cutting and prepping everything, and then when it came time to putting it all together, when I needed an extra set of hands, that she was available to assist.
Well, that's
a lot of holding things in place while.
That's a great memory though. That's something you'll remember for your whole life, is that, your mom was helping you and all that stuff. That's a pretty cool memory, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So now, where did you go? So you went to college. Where did you go to college?
At the time, it was Southwest Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri.
Okay. And do you mind if I ask you what you were studying in college?
A little bit of everything. My first year in college, I studied vocal performance and music education.
Oh, cool.
My second year of college, I studied economics. And then my third, fourth, and fifth year of college, I studied accounting.
Okay, so you couldn't really decide what you wanted to do.
And now he does none of those things.
And now I do none of those things.
Well, of course not. Why would you?
Yeah. All of those things. Accounting was literally after my sophomore year. I was trying to figure out the fastest way out of college. And for some reason, accounting, the way that the classes lined up, accounting was going to be the quickest way. And all the advisors said, "Don't do this. An accounting degree is something you want to do over 4 years, so you spread the load out. You can't do this in 2 years. It's going to kill you." And they were right. I should not have tried to do it in that period of time, and ended up leaving before I was complete anyway.
Okay. So you're a very accomplished dropout.
Yes.
Excellent. This is the part of the show where I always like to mention that I did pretty well in grade 12 geography.
Yeah.
When I got,
except you don't know what state Kansas City's in, so I'm not sure if it's true.
It's in Missouri.
Although you might now.
Yeah, it's in. It's down the road from Indiana. You go to Indianapolis, hang a left, motor on through St. Louis, and then just keep motoring across, which is 70 something?
Yeah, 70.
70s. Yeah, see, I knew that, sort of.
Except if you go to Indianapolis and turn left, you're going to end up in Washington, D.C.
Not if you're, you're right. Not if you're unless you're going north. I came to, yeah, that's right. I turned right, yeah. So I have no idea where it is. I really have no idea where it is.
12th grade geography.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we weren't doing interstates.
Okay.
And okay, smart guy. What's the capital of Saskatchewan?
Saskatoon.
Yeah, maybe. All right. So now you find yourself. So okay. So then you got out of university, and this is fascinating. You guys have this really cool. So are you and your dad like you're pretty excited about how well your business is going? Then I guess, eh?
It would be a mixture of excitement, scared, and it bounces back and forth between apprehensive and excitement because there's still some planning to do to catch up to where the business has grown to already.
Wow, and it must be partly the price and partly the service that you guys provide.
Yeah, that's one of our biggest starts into the hobby business was I started going through YouTube. We had a YouTube channel for a while when I had a little bit more time on my hands, and anybody could get a hold of me through YouTube. Anybody could get a hold of me through Facebook. And if they had any questions or anything to answer, they could get a hold of me directly, immediately. And we've made a point from day one that everyone's orders will ship the next day, regardless of. So anything we have in stock will ship out the next day. There's a couple items that are big ticket items that obviously we list right on the listings that it takes a little bit longer to get out. But we make sure the orders get out the next day, which enables some people to get their orders. Like Ron will get it practically 2 days from when he orders it because he's just halfway down the state.
Yeah, literally. I ordered something from you this week. It was a small item, and I ordered it early in the day, and I got it in the mail the next day.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And he didn't pay priority shipping. And, no. Standard price shipping. And that's another thing. We use USPS for everything, which is really great because they already go to everyone's house every day, which means their shipping rates are low. So shipping's not an arm and a leg unless you're ordering incredibly heavy items.
Right. Okay. And this was a really good idea, Ron, and I really hate admitting that, but.
Well, everybody can have one accidentally once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. Or perhapsly. So okay, so now your dad and you have built this business. It's you ship this stuff out the next day. The thing is growing, and okay, so this is my favorite question. One of my favorite questions of the podcast. Do you feel like the hobby itself is growing?
I do feel like the hobby's growing. It's always an interesting conversation. I had a long talk with Kirk who used to be at Intermountain when I was up at Springfield last year for the train show. And he continues to hear from a lot of dealers that the hobby's shrinking. And then he talks to some of the younger guys that are still in the hobby, that are in the retail business, that have the exact opposite to say. And it's not that the hobby is shrinking. It's that the classic way that the hobby used to be approached for retail purposes no longer applies. These businesses need to reach out to the clientele via new options through social media, through YouTube type situations. An ad in Model Railroad no longer gets you what it used to get you.
No.
Having a shop in the middle of a town without advertising no longer gets you what it used to get you. And we used to get some guff from some of the small retail type situations where they'd say, and it's pretty common. Look what these internet retailers are doing to this business. And I kind of laugh about it because we entered it with a very small initial inventory, and we have grown naturally over the time without taking out debt. All of these retail businesses that already had the inventory in house had the opportunity to provide these services and just chose not to.
Right.
And so now there's a group of internet only and some internet mixed with brick and mortar, or us that are started internet and are turning into a on-site type situation. That it's not that we came in to kill the retail business. We came in to service a market that was not being serviced, and it's allowed us to grow to this point.
That's a very well thought out answer, and there's a lot of points in there that I heartily agree with, because there are some shops that are flourishing in the internet world, in the internet age, because people still are going to want to go to a shop, but the shop has to run efficiently, and you have to embrace the internet in order to get both things to work together.
Yeah, that's one of the things. When I do go to a shop, it depends on if I'm going to a shop. If I'm going to a shop just to go to a shop and enjoy the day and maybe pick up one or two things that I may find in a shop, that's one thing, and I'm happy to spend a bit of time there browsing around. But when I go to a shop with something in mind, and it takes me an hour and a half to find it because nothing's organized, I'm just never going to go to that shop again.
Yeah.
Like, it took me 5 minutes. If in Kansas City, it'll take me 15 minutes to get to the nearest shop. And if it takes me 2 hours to find the thing and then get back, I've lost 2.5 hours of hobby time that I could have just purchased the thing online in 5 minutes, waited 2 days, and it was shown up at my door.
Yeah, and a well-run internet business. I mean, I don't buy any of this discussion that the internet is killing the hobby or the internet's killing hobby shops. I mean, the internet is what it is. It's here. It's not going away. So the only thing you can do is embrace it and try to work with it. And trying to pretend that it's killing the hobby, I think is the wrong way to go myself, because I think, and Ron and I have had this discussion quite a bit. I mean, we both have the same experience, is that the people you meet and the way it has brought people together, like I've described it many times on the podcast, is it's like we were all part of a nuclear holocaust. And we thought we were the only people alive on the planet. And then we all come out of our basements, and there's like all these other guys that are model railroaders, and people, mm-hmm. and girls, guys and girls that are model railroaders. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. Some of my really good friends now that I talk to on the most regular basis, I've met through model trains, through YouTube projects I've done and collaborations that I've done. There's a group of 4 or 5 of us that Ron is a part of that has a Facebook chat that runs nonstop. I've been nonstop. That's right. I've been very busy for the last 5 months with my other life, not 5 months, 5 weeks with my other life. And every day when I sit down on my computer and look up, and it says there's 99 plus messages from these people, and I was like, I was at my computer 3 hours ago. What has happened here? I can't keep up with this. I don't even have time to go back and read it. Or Derek Glass used to be very involved in YouTube, and he and I got to talking early on through a couple collaborations that we did, and he and I still talk on probably an every other day basis about the hobby or just about other things in life, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think the hobby's going to absolutely explode, and we're all going to be covered with model railroad goo. I haven't got any kind of statistics or anything like that, but I just have this sense of it's kind of gonna, because how old are you? How old are you? You said you're in your 30s?
Yeah, I'm 34.
Okay,
that sounds correct. Yeah.
Yeah, you said that with yeah, I was a little concerned there, Ron. He said it with a bit of hesitation.
Well,
Which license are you looking at?
He's really 17.
Yeah. Or 52.
Hey.
What? Oh, yeah. That's old, eh?
Be careful now.
Yeah, that's really old.
You're hitting close to the mark.
Yeah, try being 64 and looking behind you. Yeah, Steve's 30 years younger than me. I ought to tell you, listen, young man, when I was a boy. But the hobby's it's kind of like I imagine it like it's like the Steve McQueen movie, The Blob. And it's like it's kind of going woo, woo, and it's going to just kind of go boom, because there's a lot of young people. That's a great question for you, Steve. Have you noticed that, through your internet business? Like, I feel like there's a lot of young people in the hobby.
So that's the interesting part. There are a lot of young people in the hobby, and we continue to hear over and over again, and I don't think this is news to anybody, that young people aren't entering the hobby. There's no young people in the hobby, and I think that's because those statistics and whatnot are coming from, I would say, subscriptions to magazines or attendance at shows. And I think the idea is, at least for me, like, I don't attend a lot of shows, and I attend shows now more to find maybe some small manufacturers that may be a little mom and pop type thing where they're making laser cut kits out of their garage. It's something that we might want to pick up more than to go and enjoy the show. Because if I have 12 hours in a day to go to a show, that's also 12 hours that I could spend modeling. Right. And generally speaking, I would choose that 12 hours of hobby time modeling versus 12 hours of wandering around a show. Because a lot of the things, I think we're getting more specific in the hobby. So as you go to a show, the shotgun approach that people of the things that you might find there, you have to dig through all day long, because all the retailers have brought a random assortment of anything they could, hoping to catch whichever person.
Right.
And it's easier to just buy it online and spend my spare time doing the hobby rather than attending events for the hobby.
Yeah, and I think some shows will continue to flourish, like Springfield, because it's also a social event, and you don't want to spend your entire life in front of your computer. So, it's the social aspect of the shows. But you're right, shows aren't what they used to be. But the hobby's it's not gonna die, and it's not gonna shrink. It's gonna continually change, and we really have no idea where we're headed. Because Ron, you and I have had this I'm fascinated looking at how many subscribers you have on YouTube, and I'm always texting you going, you're at such and such now. You're in such and such now. And you've seen your channel grow like absolute crazy.
It has way far exceeded any expectations. I don't even know what my expectations were, but I never dreamed that it would do what it's done in under 2 years. That's for sure.
Yeah, you're at
Ron, you started with I think your first video was back in the Eric Hall building contest. Was that correct?
April of 2017? Eric's Big Build Contest 2. My first videos were the 3 video entries into that contest. Yeah, that's right.
Wow! And now you have 12,321 subscribers.
20. Okay, it sounds right.
It went up. It went up in the last couple of seconds. Holy mackerel! Every time you refresh it, the thing. So, and it's like. And you're making connections with all these people too.
Yeah, when I went to the train show, of course, going back to the train show, I went to the convention and train show this year, which I don't do every year. But I was really fascinated, because it was right in my backyard. But I was really interested to see how many people I would meet and connect with who knew me from the channel, which was about 18 months old at the time, and was a little over 10,000 subscribers. And I was dumbfounded, by the number of people that just came up to me and said, "Hey, I watch your channel, love the videos, whatever." I just met some really, really neat people from all across the country. It was really cool. That really was gratifying to me.
Yeah, we talked about that before, and I said people are going to be talking to you like crazy. They're going to be coming up to you like crazy, and sure enough, because they see it, because I have no idea where the entertainment world is going, but people now you have your own news, you have your own TV channel basically. So many I'm sorry, but like I was just going to say, my son, he doesn't even have cable TV, and he's 33. He doesn't have cable.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way my kids. I've got a daughter who's 22 in college. I don't know if she ever turns on a television. Once in a while, she'll watch something on Netflix. But for the most part, her entertainment comes from YouTube and other social media types of outlets, video. That's what she does. My son is 19. Him not so much, but still a large part of his entertainment just comes from, right off the internet.
I don't have cable in New York. I have internet, and I've got Netflix, Amazon, and a Roku.
A Roku.
So
what's a Roku?
It's a streaming platform, I guess. For it came installed on the television that I bought.
Oh, okay.
But it seems sort of like an Amazon Fire TV type set box. It offers all sorts of channels, so I can Fox Sports or ESPN or stuff like that.
I've never even heard of that. See, and that's the other thing that, and one of the things that I discovered, it takes a small. I got fascinated by podcasts when I started driving back and forth to Florida by myself because my wife and I have a home in Florida, and she had to have her hips replaced, and she couldn't take the drive, so she would fly, and I would drive back the gear and the dog and everybody back and forth, and so then I thought, podcasts, and so I started listening, and the one that fascinated me the most was Kevin Smith, who was the fellow that did the movie Clerks and wrote it and produced it, and he said, you don't need as big an audience as people think. The old days of, a TV show was successful because it had 10 million viewers are long gone.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a going concern with 12,321 people as subscribers. I mean, Ron, your thing has grown. Yours has grown like crazy, just like Steve's and his dad's business has grown like crazy. Like, there's a world out there that will accept you if you do it properly.
Right. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think this goes to, my channel and Steve's business both. People will be drawn to it if you're giving them something that they value and you are at least making an obvious attempt at doing it on a quality level and always, working to improve. And I think that's a big part of it. People have always, commented on the quality of just the videos that I make, and I work really, really hard with every single video to make sure that they're better. People do appreciate. It doesn't have to be perfect, but
no,
it needs to be worth their time.
Well, and that was how Model Railroader was so successful over the years, was that the magazine was top quality. It was a top quality magazine with top quality product in it. Except for there was a stretch there in the late 90s and early 2000s where they had one column that was a little rough. But
yeah, they had that one guy, and he was holding them back. But.
Yeah. Okay, Steve. So we keep saying so now, when did you move to New York?
I became a full-time New York resident about a year and a half ago.
And were you living in Kansas City before that?
I was traveling with work nonstop. I would get, on average, about 4 weeks a year that I wasn't traveling. So prior to that, I mostly stayed in the guest bedroom at my parents' house, or would take a vacation on my weeks off. Or there was a single year that I rented a place in Nashville. That year, I think I had 2 months off.
Okay. Are you Garth Brooks?
No, I am not.
Okay. So
different part of the industry.
Okay, so do you mind if I ask what you do for a living that would take you all to so much traveling?
Yeah. So I'm a lighting technician for Broadway style musicals and plays.
Wow. That's cool. That's a pretty cool job to have. And how did you stumble into that from being an accounting student?
That was actually the best part of college. There was a theater at the college that what we refer to as a roadhouse. It has shows come in that are traveling shows come through that is simply there not to produce anything, but just to host events. And so my freshman year in college, a friend of mine had a job there, and he's like, as long as you know your stage directions. And I was like, well, I do know my stage directions. He's like, you can push a box then. So I went over there and I got a job as a hand, but at that time I was pretty much a box pusher. And within a couple years, I was management there. And by the time I left college, I actually left because a production company had offered me a full-time job as a department head.
Wow.
And then within a couple years, Tour offered me a full-time job as a department head. And I thought, I could see the country. I could see the world. I think that's a great idea. So off I went.
And so that must have been pretty interesting for a while. I mean, I'm sure you got tired of being on the road, but that must have been pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was nice to be paid to go see all the things that most people pay to go see.
Yeah. And okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you got interested in the hobby again because you went into a hobby store when you were in college. So as you're doing all this traveling, where was the hobby in your life?
For a couple years, it went away entirely, and then it got to a point where, as the shows got larger that I was on, I spent more and more time in every city. So I managed to put together sort of a hobby kit for myself that I could travel with, and so I got back into the hobby again. Really got back into it doing scratch built buildings and building structure kits, and that's where the YouTube channel actually started. Was me doing scratch builds,
just like Rod Stewart.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
I just needed those hands to deliver that box to another hotel room for me.
Yeah, I met Rod Stewart because of Model Railroader, and all he wanted to do was talk to me about model railroading, and I'm like, yeah, but you're Rod Stewart.
Let's sing a song, man.
Well, it was at the start of a show. I told the story before. The guy, it was mostly Marty McGurk that was, and he, Rod Stewart had been in the magazine Model Railroader a couple of times, and
right.
And I mentioned offhand that Rod Stewart was coming to Toronto, and we were going to go see him. And I'm sure it was Marty. He says, "Oh, you got to call him. You got to call his assistant and tell him that you're going." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he says, "No, seriously, he wants to meet all the guys from the magazine." And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, I know they're just pulling my leg, right? So, he says, "Here's the number," and I write the number down, and the number's sitting on the counter for 3 or 4 days. And my wife says, like, "What is this number?" And I said, it's just the guys at the magazine pulling my leg. They say this is the number to Rod Stewart's house, and his assistant will answer it. And she's like, "Well, you're going to call it, aren't you?" And I'm like, "No, it's not Rod Stewart's number." And she says, "You're going to call it." So I call it, and this guy answers with an English accent and says, "Hello." And I said, "Oh, yeah, hi, how you doing?" And he says, "Can I help you?" And I said, yeah. I said, I write a column in Model Railroader, and the guys told me I should call because Rod Stewart would want to meet me, or meet up. And he says, "Oh, what column do you write?" And I'm like, "Why do you want to know?" And anyways, long story short, it turned out to be Rod Stewart's house and Rod Stewart's assistant, and a guy, so then he arranged. So then he says to me, "Well, how many tickets do you need for the show?" And I said, "Well, I don't need any tickets. I got tickets." So then, "Well, there'll be a backstage pass, and you'll go and meet him before the show." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And so, as we're walking up to the box office to get our all-access passes, I'm saying to my wife, "Don't get too excited because this might not be anything. Like, I find this hard to believe." Right? But sure enough, we get there, and there's these all-access passes. And we end up eating, we are walking around and we're eating dinner with the road crew because they have this big spread and blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to and this is at the this is early days of texting. So, it was like when you had to push the numbers for texting, and I hated texting that way.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get a hold of his road assistant, and there's nothing much happening. And finally I said to my wife about 15 minutes before the show, I said, let's just go sit down. So we go sit down. We no more barely sat down, and I get a text, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm out front." "Well, you got to come around back." So we go around the back, and sure enough, we go in, and this guy's there, and he says, we talked to this lady, and she says, "Can I help you?" And I tell her the story, and she says, oh, and she calls this guy over, and, "Oh, Rod wants to meet you," and we turn around, and there he was. Rod Stewart. and the picture I have of this thing is, so then we're talking for 5 or 10 minutes, and the band is now out on the stage, doing instrumental of "If You Think I'm Sexy," and you can hear the crowd starting to clap. They want him to come out. And then just as he's about to leave, my wife says, "Oh, can we have a picture?" And we take this picture, and then Rod says to my wife, "Well, let's make sure it's okay." It was with a digital camera. And the vision I have is there's Rod Stewart and my wife looking at this picture to make sure it was acceptable for her while the band is playing and people are going crazy. And he goes, "Oh, okay," and he turns and walks out, and he's Rod Stewart. And I'm like,
that's great.
Yeah. So then we go back to the seats. We're kind of standing there in a daze, right? Because this is like 10 years ago. We're standing there in a daze. And I said, well, I guess we'll go back to the seats. So we go back and we're sitting amongst people that are really annoying. Middle-aged 50-somethings that think they're still teenagers and rocking away. And it was like, really? Can't we just sit down and watch the show? So I said to my wife, I says, I think we can watch this from backstage. So we get up and we walk through again. We walk through security and we walk around backstage. And as soon as we walk through the door, the guy comes run up. He says, "Where'd you go?" I said, "Well, we went out." Well, no, we got seats here for you. So that was very cool. And then I met him again. He came back to Toronto and my friend Jim Sacco, who owns City Classics, he's been to many of his shows. So it's there's a lot of show business people. There's a lot of people in the world that love model railroading. So, okay. So Steve, you're on now that we finished talking about me again.
I doubt that we're finished.
Yeah, I doubt that too. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, Steve, so you're on the road. You've built yourself some sort of a kit that you can do modeling, and you start a YouTube channel.
Yeah, and then that YouTube channel led to myself and another gentleman starting YouTube Model Builders Live.
So you were one of the creators of YouTube Model Builders?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that was and by the time we actually launched that show, it was very difficult for me to do while on the road. So because I was relying on hotel internet.
Right.
So by the time we actually made it to live shows, it was fine when it was a group of 2 or 3 of us that were doing planning stages or testing out stuff for people. But once it became a large group and trying to stream all this together, the hotel internet failed miserably.
Yeah.
So I kind of pulled myself out of that project. It had kind of burned me out on the hobby a little bit anyways, just because of the amount of work that was involved in doing it, which removed me from actually enjoying the things about the hobby that I enjoyed.
Right.
So I started to refocus back on doing the things that I enjoyed in the hobby, which was model building, scratch building with styrene, stuff like that.
And primarily the scratch building you're doing is in N scale?
It is.
Okay. And yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so is that hard to scratch build in N scale, or is it again, now we're getting to the part where you couldn't get the parts easily. So
it's not difficult to scratch build in N scale. It's more, I don't even think it's really more precise, because you're going to make your cuts precise with a sanding stick anyways. So you got to get them close with a knife. You got to snap. But once you start putting it together, you're going to run into the exact same problems you have with HO scale.
Right.
And that ultimately you're going to get a file out, or you're going to get a sanding stick out to make sure everything meets correctly, because the seams are still going to be the same. And if you use the right glues, your seams are going to disappear.
Yeah.
So it's not any more difficult. It's just smaller.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so, and you've been building stuff in lieu of either putting it on the layout at your dad's place, or in lieu of, you have a small layout now, you said.
Yeah. My layout now, I don't get to spend a lot of time with it. So it's like probably not even 2 feet. I think it's 16 inches by 14 feet long. It currently has 2 buildings sitting on it. Neither one of them are scratch built. Both of them are DPM kits.
Okay.
But I just wanted something up there, so I threw together a couple DPM kits quickly, which is interesting. Me putting a DPM kit together quickly now is so much different than me throwing a DPM kit together quickly 5 years ago. Because DPM kits are easy. You just got to take time to do them right, and then they look beautiful. But if you just quickly throw them together, they require, like every model, they require some love and care before you put it together.
Well, sure. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so you talked about how you kind of got burned out doing the YouTube modelers thing, and is there any fear of that now that the business is going as well as it is?
My work life keeps me busy enough with other things that sometimes the working for the hobby shop and doing the work that I do for the hobby shop eats up some of my hobby time, but I've always managed to find a little bit of time to do it when I need to. I also use it as an escape when I'm stressed out. I can sit down and just work on a model where the stresses of life may be bothering me a lot, but when I sit and work on a model, all I can think about is the model in front of me, and it helps me escape from all of that for a bit. So it's used for relaxing for me as well.
Yeah.
So I've always found time to do it.
Yeah, which has always primarily been the main key of the hobby anyways. Actually, I was having a good conversation with Chris Adams and Kaylee Zhang there a while ago, and also Seth Gartner, and they all kind of said the same thing, is that the hobby is about producing things, creating things. And I don't think that'll ever go away. I mean, even though people want to play video games and all that stuff, it'll never go away. That what the hobby is really about is building and creating. It's an artistic adventure, really.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and being in
the same boat there.
Yeah, and being in the
big part of it for me, because when I was working my way through school, I did carpentry work and construction work, and at the end of the day, you can always see what you produce, with your hands. You get in a professional kind of a job, and so much of what you do is intangible. For me, it's a really refreshing thing to be able to come and do a hobby work and build a model and say, okay, there's a physical thing that I created. Because my professional job doesn't have that. So I totally get that.
And
I love the immediacy of the feedback. And not necessarily feedback from others, but you do something and you have something in front of you to reflect upon versus one of the biggest things that drove me crazy about going to school for accounting. I could do something that I may not see the results of for 6 months. And it's like, no, I need results faster than 6 months in order to improve or whatever the case may be.
Well, yeah, the world has changed so much. I mean, like you say, you guys have like your own private Facebook channel with 5 or 6 guys on there, and you guys are constantly conversing. I'm sure you're showing each other what you're doing and all that stuff. Like that's what we do. I have a group of guys that we're always talking on Facebook and showing each other what we're doing and stuff like that. I mean, it has changed so much in that before the only way you could get exposure or talk to other modelers was you had to go to a club or you had to go to a meet or something or a train show. And now you can immediately, even if you have a problem, you've got people you can ask and stuff like that. Like that hobby has changed so much in the last 5 years. When did you start YouTube Modelers? What year was that?
I think that was probably 2014, 2015, probably 2015.
Okay. So you're like, it's really, social media has really just exploded over the last 5 years is the way I see it. I mean, the podcast is 4 years old now, and there was a bit of podcasting going on, but I mean, over the last 4 or 5 years, that's why I think the hobby's going to explode, because people are so connected now. They just weren't connected at all. I mean, I was doing a podcast earlier. One of the people on it was a fella from England who we've become good friends. And I mean, just the community that is grown from digital media just blows me away.
Yeah, it's interesting. Right after the National Train Show, and I think Ron's probably heard me talk about this before, during the National Train Show, while that check-in day, I went with my father when he was checking in, and I kind of took poll of what was around me, and I was by far the youngest guy in the room, which didn't surprise me terribly. But then getting home that night, I decided that some of the things that I wanted to find out was more of the financial stuff, and being a not-for-profit that NMRA is, you could find all these financial things online because they're required as a not-for-profit to file these things with the SEC. And so I was doing a bunch of research into it, and shortly after the train show, I got on Facebook to one of the large model railroad social groups, and I posed the question of, can someone, I was like, I don't want this to turn into a bash fest. I just want anyone to tell me the benefits that being a member of NMRA provides versus what you can get out of social media or just online searching now.
Right.
And once the grenade cleared and we started having some people started to have a casual conversation about it, it turned out that the majority of people that I spoke to about the situation views NMRA as a social group or sort of a fraternity type situation, which is totally fine, and I understand that completely. Just a lot of the younger guys get that experience now social media, in online, this type of thing where the three of us are talking and we don't have to be sitting in a community center in the basement somewhere to do this. We can do it sort of whenever we want to, and across great regions. You're in Toronto, Ron's sitting small town in Missouri, and I'm sitting in New York City, and you might as well be sitting across the table from me.
Exactly. That to me just absolutely stupefies me. Maybe because at the age of 64, and I've always kind of like been interested in what's around the next corner. That's how I got onto the podcast. It just literally stupefies me how we can, now, like if we met each other at Springfield, Steve, and we hey, I'm Steve and I'm Lionel. Like right away, my friend Andy Dorr says it best. It eliminates first date jitters.
Yeah, yeah.
Like Ron, you and I was it in the restaurant that we saw each other for the first time?
Yeah, you had interviewed me for the show, which still hasn't aired, by the way.
But it will be.
So
stop now. Just hang on there, sport.
I'm teasing.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, it is now exactly almost 10 p.m. on Sunday, November the 18th. On Monday at 2:30 a.m., November the 19th, episode 110, featuring Ron Marsh, will be broadcast. So in 4.5 hours, if you don't go to bed, you'll be able to.
That's it, Ron. You got 4.5 hours to poke the bear.
Yeah. Stuck my foot in my mouth. Anyway, so you had interviewed me, I don't know, a few weeks before that, which was, we had talked a little bit on social media, and then that was the first time we really talked. And we had, I don't know, I think maybe you'd texted a little bit back and forth. And it was it was Monday. So like, I guess technically the second day of the convention, and I'm in line at a little bistro or whatever in the mall where the convention is being held. And I hear in this booming and unmistakable voice somewhere behind me, yeah, as long as we don't run into that Ron Marsh character, we'll be just fine. And there's Lionel with your entourage, as I call them, your group of Modeler's Life guys, and I had a great time that week getting to know all of those guys. We've connected with several of them on social media and have continued those relationships since then. All of whom I kind of met just through this podcast initially. So
my feeling, Steve, on the NMRA is that I don't want it to go away, but if they sold the memberships for $19.95, I would say to everybody, let's all join, and it's the umbrella that we live under.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what you get, is that we're all organized now for $20 a year. We all agree that this is the umbrella that we live under, and use it as that. Use it as something like that. Like, you don't get much more than, your membership card and your whatever, but we're all connected by that, and they could utilize social media and everything like that. I don't want it to go away, but I sure would like it to change.
Yeah, I think it's very much like the hobby shops that are screaming the internet is killing the hobby. They have failed to embrace current technology and current social media options and ways to reach out to connect with people.
Yeah.
And now there's a large barrier to entry. I don't know what the fee is to join right now, but I know it's not below $50.
Yeah.
Which I guess they send out a magazine, and I've looked at the benefits that are provided, and you're a member of a region and a local chapter, and you can go to the library in Chattanooga anytime you want, and all of these things. But again, I can get all of the information that is provided from all of those sources, other places, that is not going to charge me
exactly
a yearly fee of upward of whatever the price may be.
Yeah, and it's a shame, because like you say, they're getting there. They think the hobby's dying, and I don't think that's the case at all. I think that there are so many young people your age and younger, or 45 and younger, that are so connected through I think that the hobby is much more vibrant than people realize. And you've experienced it. This is why it's really interesting talking to you. Your story about your business is fascinating because it's only 7 years old and you're bursting at the seams. So it's like kind of like, well, if the hobby was dying, why would this business be bursting at the seams? It sounds like you can't. It sounds like you can't even keep up almost.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because we're trying to grow naturally, it's become a little bit difficult because as we're growing, we're allowing the profits to roll through into the expansion of the store instead of into personal pockets. People are expecting us to have every brand new item as it comes out, and so it's created a loop of us trying to juggle a little bit to make sure that we get all the we get every new rolling stock that comes out from all the major manufacturers and most of the new locomotives that come out, but that just requires a little bit of juggling, and our prices have to be right to make sure it doesn't spend too much time on the shelf, because the longer it spends on the shelf is the less space we have in the store. So it's an interesting thing, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, the producers are only producing small numbers, and you can only find it for a couple weeks, or that model was only out for like 2 months." And it's like, well, the producers just are doing these set numbers, and most of the producers and manufacturers encourage pre-ordering. Pre-ordering is I guess, necessary evil. Even as a retailer, I hate dealing with pre-orders. They're a big pain in the butt because nothing ever comes out when it's supposed to, which turns into all sorts of other problems. So as retailers, we have to take guesses on what we think is going to sell, which is always a crapshoot.
I'll bet.
Some stuff disappears very quickly. Some of that microtrain stuff that comes out, I'll be like, oh, that's probably going to be a popular car. We'll put 16 of those in stock, which is a lot for a small retail shop. And 2 days after I have them listed, I'm kicking myself because we're out of stock of them already. And I'm like, well, and people say, do you have any more of those left? And I was like, unfortunately, they disappeared in 2 days. That's the world we live in.
Well, yeah, and look at it, even just here, I'm looking on the N scale page, and the very first thing that's listed is the Cato Spirit of the Union Pacific, and it's already sold out.
Oh man, that model, and it's sold out across the board. Cato has only released the DC version of it so far. They're at the Kobo shops right now getting their DCC versions and their Loke Sound versions equipped to ship those out. But yeah, those models, it was interesting. By the time they came in a period that I was incredibly busy with the tech for the King and I National Tour. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really get to get them listed and get them online for people until this week. So it was probably 2 weeks. And I had heard that they sold well. And so I went to look to see if there was any available. And I could not find them anywhere. So I reached out to a couple of good customers. I reached out to Ron one and said, hey, this is here. I still have 8 of them that I haven't listed because I haven't had time. I just want to make sure, some of our regular customers had an opportunity to get them if they wanted them and hadn't had that opportunity yet. Because another thing that's happening is when stuff is coming out, it's not getting immediately announced to the world, hey, this is in. And so unless you're going to a hobby shop all the time, or you belong to a hobby shop or an e-shop that is sending out a newsletter to say what's come in, or you're actively involved in Facebook. And I know that I try to post stuff as soon as we list it. As soon as it gets in, I list it and immediately post it on Facebook so that you can see what came in every day as if you're standing at the hobby shop and you're watching it roll across the counter.
Yeah.
Because people are missing the opportunity to get things that they want because they don't know it came in. They find out a week later and they go to get it and it was super popular, like the Spirit of the UP was, or Spirit of the UP, and it's gone. And it's gone. The Spirit of the UP is probably not gone forever, but it'll be a while before they run another batch of it, if they run another batch of it.
Yeah, and you was somebody going to say something there? No? Okay. You said Cato in the, what'd you say, the Kobo shop or?
Is that they have their own exclusive installation, which is interesting because I don't actually know how the system works, but I believe the system works by they have set up set up with some DCC installers. It's not Kato. I do not believe it's Kato specific, and they ship out the models to these DCC installers to then get shipped on to where they need to go.
It must be a massive job for you trying to be on the road with a show like The King and I. And by the way, do you think you could find me a small part in your next production?
Yeah, I don't know that you're gonna want to be in the next one.
Oh, what's the next one?
The next one. Wait, when this will come out, I will be involved in a new music or a new play, which is premiering on Broadway. I think we open about the time this comes out, probably, called Gary. It's a sequel to Titus Andronic. Don't quote me on that one, but
right.
It's a play called Gary, and then there's a line after it that I can't remember what it is.
All right, and why would I not want to have like a small part in that? I can do anything.
I don't know what it's about at all.
Yeah, see, so that's
the brilliant part about my job. I'll find out what it's about as we get closer to it, but
yeah, a very good friend of mine. A very good friend of mine named Jonathan Tessero is a musical director. And last year he did a Christmas show on a theater not far from Broadway. And this year he's doing the Christmas show again. And
is he doing music, Radio City? Christmas Spectacular?
No, he's not doing that. It's his own show, actually. Last year he was just the musical director, and this year he managed to get the show. And I'll find out anyway. Anyways, yeah, fascinating. So I've asked him. This year, the stars of the show are Clay Aiken and Ruben Studdard from.
That is on Broadway.
That show is on Broadway. Yeah,
it will be on Broadway. I believe it's going to be at. It's the same. The Imperial. I think it's going to be the Imperial.
Yes, and anyways, Jonathan. I met his dad, and then I met Jonathan was the musical director when Dame Edna did his last tour across North America. And that's a great story, too, which I've told many times. So anyways, Jonathan and I have become great friends. He's about your age. And I constantly berate him about perhaps maybe a small part. He also has yet to been able to find me a part. He says he's looking for just the right part. See, that's the answer. What you should have said is, sure, I just got to find you the right part.
Anytime you come to New York, you can come sit next to me and participate in my job.
All right, okay. Because you're a lighting director now.
Yeah, I sit on the other side of the proscenium.
Yeah.
I stay out front.
Yeah, that must be a fascinating job. You must like that job, do you?
I do enjoy my job. It is still a job. I don't go to work thinking it's going to be a lot of fun. I do enjoy my job. It is fun on days, but it definitely has ups and downs.
I know. That's the great thing about this hobby is I was saying that to somebody yesterday. I forget what podcast I was doing, but I was doing one. And the great thing about this hobby is it circumvents social barriers. Like a famous brain surgeon could be who is interested in the Mopac, and if he meets a guy that's a good, drives a UPS truck in Florida, and they're both interested in the Mopac and a particular locomotive, they can become fast friends, which is such a great thing about this hobby. Look at you and me now, Steve. We're going to be great friends forever, and eventually you're going to make me a star on Broadway, or Jonathan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, I gotta throw one story in here before we get away from that whole Broadway subject. Last, I don't know, what was it, Stephen? February, when the Tony Awards are given.
June.
Oh yeah, I was close. Anyway, so I don't even know how, because I wasn't watching the show, but somehow I became aware. I knew that Stephen had been involved with. Was it Once Upon This Island last year?
Yeah, Once on This Island.
Once on This Island. Again, I'm close. Anyway, I knew he was involved in that, and my daughter, who happens to be a theater person and knows that I know Steve and all this, she texted me and said, "Hey, Once on This Island got a Tony for like best revival," And so, hey, that's really cool. So I text Steven and said, hey, I just heard. And Steven is texting me from the Tony party.
Oh,
and I'm like,
cool
this is the closest I'm ever going to get to actually get involved in something on Broadway. And I won't tell you everything that he said from there, but you know, it was just cool. I'm like, hey, you know, I'm some guy from, you know, nowhere in the Midwest, and I'm texting my way into the Tony party tonight. It's pretty cool.
And it's with Ron. It's another great. I enjoy the story of your daughter sort of into theater and whatnot, and when we were in Kansas City, Ron and myself and Ron's family, including his daughter, sat down and had a discussion about theater over breakfast one morning. And it was probably a great opportunity for Ron to, like, I grew up in a non-theater family. Theater was not part of my family. That was just not a thing that happened. So there was no one, I hadn't really intended to go in theater anyways when I was a child, but there was no one there to talk to about it. And Ron, I think, had the opportunity to be like, oh, wait, I know a guy who works on Broadway. Maybe we can maybe he'd be happy to talk to you.
Yeah. And she really appreciated that. She grew up in a community theater family, so we've done a little community theater. That's the best kept secret on YouTube. I actually have done a little community theater. Fortunately, there's no video of it.
I'm getting a really bad feeling here.
Yeah, there are now people in Ron's town that are like, you know what? I have a video of that.
Yeah, but I'm getting a really bad feeling here that the next time Steven has access to a part for a middle-aged guy that's slightly overweight, I got a feeling I'm second in line here.
Behind who?
Behind you. Trust me, you're not at your ideal weight, Ron.
Wasn't Norm on Cheers? He said, "What are you up to?" I said, "My ideal weight if I was 9 feet tall."
Yeah, exactly. It's a dog eat dog world out there, Normie, and I'm wearing milk bone underwear. Boy, Steve, it's like we could talk to you for hours and hours because you're so connected in the hobby with your business. It's like you were talking about pre-orders and that's something I didn't deal with back in, you know, that didn't even exist, and that's something new to the hobby. And so how do you find the time? So it sounds like you're kind of the guy that works the website.
That is accurate. I try to take time every single day a little bit to spend on the hobby. Some of my friends that are in the hobby also keep me updated on, hey, did you see this release or did you see that release? I get emails about most of it as the manufacturers announce them, at least, so that I can keep up to it that way. And then we make judgment calls on whether or not we publicize this thing might be coming out and maybe it's from Rocco or maybe it's from Rapido and it's not something that we think will do well in the US market. So we just make judgment calls and don't market it at all. So we have to take choices. But yeah, luckily I have great distributors that are quick to email me all the stuff, knowing my schedule. Our two biggest distributors I've had the chance to see multiple times each, because I've had tours that played both of the cities that those shows or those distributors are based in.
Right.
So they understand the lifestyle that I have, and they've been really great about making sure that I see everything that comes across their desk also comes into my inbox. And now, if my inbox is actually got to every day, that'd be something else. But at least it's there for me to find eventually.
And I hate email. I absolutely detest email. Because the problem with email is you feel like to me, I'm too wordy. So I'm like, oh, hi, Steve, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like I got to write more than I need to write. I'm more of a texting guy. Steve, you and I, we can text constantly.
Yeah.
When I'm a star, I won't forget you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Drag me along in your coattails.
Yeah, exactly. Or perhapsly. I have a friend, Tony Cook, who's the editor of Model Railroad News, and he's a very dear friend of mine. And he says, like, Model Railroad News wouldn't even existed 30 years ago because there wasn't that much stuff coming out as fast as it does now. That's another telltale sign that the hobby's growing. It's like the amount of stuff that comes out is just, it's mind-boggling trying to keep up with it all. And do you carry every manufacturer, or are you selective, or is it based on some of them won't deal with you, or?
We carry most manufacturers. There are still some in the hobby that have not embraced online retail as a legitimate reason to carry their products.
Wow.
So we do not carry those. They're still but we carry most, and a couple of the biggest ones. So Athearn and Walthers both still require a brick and mortar store in a commercial location. Pretty much that you still have to live by the old model to become a dealer for Walthers or Athearn.
Wow.
And part of the Athearn thing is, I believe, because of Horizon Hobby, and now their entry requirements actually say that you need to be a full line hobby store, because Horizon wants to sell you not only model trains, but they want to sell you model planes and everything else that Horizon is under the Horizon banner.
It must be fascinating for you, Ron. I would like your opinion on this when I'm finished blathering on here, but it must be endlessly fascinating for you. You said you were 34, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it must be endlessly fascinating and frustrating for you at the same time when you're dealing with like a company like Walthers or Athearn that says you still have to have brick and mortar, and here you are at an age where, you know, the internet has been a huge part of your life, probably for at least half your life, and you're kind of going, why? Because we look at what we're doing, look at the amount of product we're moving. Like, it must just be unbelievably frustrating for you at this point of, the scales are trying to tip one way or the other, and they just are digging their heels in.
It was really interesting. There was a time a couple years ago when Caboose Hobbies in Denver closed, and I'd been out to Caboose a few times, and I liked Caboose's shop. It was big. It had a lot of things. There was, most of the time that I was there was always people in there. But Walthers had every time we had talked to people at Walthers or sales reps at Walthers, they had held Caboose Hobbies up as this shining example of everything that the hobby should be and everything that they wanted out of their retailers. And this is what you need to be. You need to be like Caboose Hobbies. You need to be like Caboose Hobbies. And then all of a sudden, Caboose Hobbies closed because they couldn't make it work anymore. And I spoke to Walthers shortly after that, and one of the younger guys on the sales team was like, I've been pushing for you, because they come out with things like a retail shop can provide value-added services, or there are all these small things that are key words for them, and it's like online retailers can also provide those value-added services, because you no longer need to be in person to service something. You can service something through a video chat. You can help that person, walk that person through any part of the process. Or if you can't, then they can drive to a hobby shop. But the nearest hobby shop to some people is 2-3 hours away, which, if you've got one broken locomotive, most likely you're not driving 3 hours to get it serviced. So all these value-added things, and we reached out and provided, like, here are the things that we provide, because we stay active on social media. We stay active. At the time, we were very active on YouTube. Like, we provided all these services. We provided tutorials on how to do things. We provided information about all the new releases. Like, the information that we were providing via an online forum or method was generally better than the information I could get by walking into a hobby shop that I was not a regular at. But that was the younger sales rep that I was working with absolutely understood that, and he was like, "We've been fighting for you. Like, your name has come up multiple times, not because of attachment to this communication, but like, who are these guys? How, where do these guys keep coming from? They keep popping up on our feed. Why do we know about these guys? Oh, well, they don't meet this model." So he was pressing forward with that. And then when Caboose Hobbies went under, he was like, "This is a great opportunity." We sit in these meetings, and all of his bosses say, look at Caboose Hobbies. They should be like Caboose Hobbies. And all of a sudden they're eating their words because, oh, this mecca of what we want in a shop is no longer.
Yeah.
So what do we do now?
And now here you are trying to determine whether or not you should open a brick and mortar shop.
Yeah, and it's funny. There's two opinions on that. One is mine, one is my father's. And it was much heavier. It was much further apart initially because I never wanted the standard brick and mortar store like you would find 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I didn't want that little downtown store that was small and you could never find anything in.
Yeah.
Ron's been to the shop. Everything in the shop is meticulously placed in a way that a picker can go in and pick an order and get that order out very efficiently.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I don't want that to ever break down, because regardless of opening a storefront or not, online sales are still going to be our bread and butter.
Yeah.
They're still going to be 90+% of our business. So it's more of a service to the community to have people come in. So in that mindset, I would, if or when we open a place, it will be an inventory managed that way.
Yeah.
Where we are happy to show you around. We're happy to provide, maybe a couple terminals that you could look through what's all online, a couple display cases probably, but our inventory management has to be spot on so that we can ensure that we get orders out to our online customers in a timely manner. We don't want to send an email that says, hey, we can't find that product, so we just spent 6 hours looking for it and we don't think it's here.
Well, and that's basically Amazon, right? I mean, that's how they grew. Is a guy goes in and picks the order, and away you go.
And I'll tell you, if you go to their website, then Midwest Model Railroad's, their customer site, the banner. In fact, I've got it in front of me right now. Their banner that runs across the front, and one of the pictures on the banner is kind of a montage of pictures from their store, and it looks OCD kind of perfect. Everything just in perfect rows and in perfect places. And those aren't staged pictures. I've been in their store, in their warehouse area, and that's what it looks like. I mean, it is immaculate and meticulous. It would be easy for somebody coming there who knew nothing about the organization to quickly pick it up and say, oh yeah, I know exactly where to find that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So these pictures then of stock shelves are actually of your situation where you have stuff.
Those are pictures from inside the store.
Wow.
Or inside
What a fascinating story, Ron. It really.
It was just.
No, I'm sorry. That's the one thing I'm no good at podcasting. I talk too much. But I mean,
no.
It's exciting to talk to you because you started a business in 2011. There's many people that are not properly connected to the world, with much hand wringing going on, going, oh my God, it's all coming to an end. And yet here we are talking to a fella that's, with his dad that has got a business that's growing basically so fast they can't keep up with it. And you're right. Like, I mean, there's so many ways to interact with customers now. Like the fella that helps me with the podcast, he lives, just north of Cincinnati. And he has a business where he does consulting and stuff like that. And whenever I have a problem, I just call him up and say, can you help me with this and that? And we talk, we chat, where we can see each other and stuff. And like, there's no reason for people to think that they can't get help just because they buy it from an online store. And the better the online store operates, the better, the more connected it's going to be with people. I mean, Ron, your deal is exactly the same way. And by the way, you've picked up 2 more subscribers since you're now up to 12,323.
You're keeping better track than I am.
Well, I'm fascinated by it because you know what? You know why I got excited? Because of the quality. Because I was very lucky to be involved with Kalmbach Publishing and to work in a magazine of that high a quality, and to learn how it's done. And I mean, it's the quality that you produce. And like I've said to you, the fact
why I make my videos. Because David Pop wouldn't answer my emails.
Well,
anyway, sorry.
Whatever. Don't get me started on that story. I mean, it's fascinating to watch. I tell the story too. My own personal business was going down the tubes, and I can remember saying to my secretary, if we don't, and her daughter was just at that age. This is 10 years or 7, 8 years ago. And I said, if we don't figure out social media, and her daughter doesn't watch TV at all. And I said, it's got to be social media. And once we hooked into social media, away we went again, because that's where the world is. It's there's a young guy at my head office. I own a franchise, and one of my businesses is a franchise. And there's this young guy, about 34, really great kid, and it's a kid to me because he's 30 years younger than me. Anyways, he started talking to me about Google reviews, because we'd hit another lull in the action, and he said, you're doing really good. You have a great Facebook presence, but your Google reviews, you've got like 3. And he started pointing out to me. So, then we made a push on Google reviews, and the business took off again. It's all about social media and digital world, not just social media, but the digital world and how you connect to it. I mean, Midwest Model Railroad isn't social. It's a viable business that works through the digital world. Fascinating.
It's interesting. I take care of 99% of all of our internet presence, and mid-September I started working on Fiddler on the Roof National Tour, and that rolled straight into King and I tour launch. And so it wasn't until it was like September 7th through November 11th that I was sort of pulled away from the business, where I was having very minimal time to do things. So quickly the thing that dropped off was social media. And for the first month, there wasn't really a big difference in sales numbers. But by the second month, mid-October to mid-November, there was a stark difference in sales numbers, just because we had become inactive in social groups.
Wow. That is so cool. See, I'm excited about
that. Tells a lot right there.
Oh man, oh yeah, it's an exciting time to be a part of, because we're right on the threshold of a new world. And I mean, the hobby too. If this hobby's going to explode, it's absolutely going to explode. I don't know how, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's just I think there's a wave of people. There's a wave of people under the age of 35 that are all connected. And they're going to kind of start moving more forward in mass, and all of a sudden you're going to go, well, wait a minute, the hobby didn't die. There's all these people that came along, and they will have been connected much more than anybody else, and there'll be this mass of hobbyists, that will have an impact on the hobby. What they want and what they're modeling and stuff like that. I was talking to Chris Palomares, Athern. I'll work on him too for you, Steve.
Thanks.
But yeah, he thinks 30% of the modelers are into STEAM, the young people. Fast. So okay, so just so we're clear on this, if you did another tour with Fiddler on the Roof or the King and I, you really don't think you could find me a small part, eh?
I'd be happy to look for one.
Okay, yeah, as long as so long as I have that feeling that you're actively paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be important. What do you think, Ron?
I know I'd come to see it.
Yeah. Even if I was like the store clerk or something.
Right.
What did you think, Steve? Was this what you expected, or was it? It's now an hour and a half that you'll never get back, or?
No, it was great. My commutes are about. It depends on where I'm going, but my commutes are anywhere from 30 minutes to 90 minutes each morning, working here in New York City. And that's where I started listening to most of the Modeler's Life podcast, is on my 90-minute commutes, because I could get generally a full episode in.
Right. That's something, Ron. You and I both are fascinated by this, because people are watching you like crazy, and people are listening to me, and I'm thinking, all I feel like doing is apologizing because they got to listen to me for 90 minutes. Or interject. You got to hear me interject. I think this is very cool. Steve, I think this is so cool that you and your dad have this business, and it's so doing so well. I just feel like, there's 1,000 questions I always say that, but I feel like man, we haven't even scratched the surface. What's your favorite? This is a question. This will be the last question. We'll finish with this question. I was talking to a fella named Rob Arsenault, who is, he has a website called weathermytrains.com and does spectacular weathering. And he's a retired serviceman, and now does this business. And we were talking about detail threshold. Like the models, like what more can they do to the models? Like, is it like, what do you think the direction of the industry is going to go with? You know, the models are so detailed and so spectacular now. What do you think is going to be the next thing?
I don't know. I actually, one of my favorite companies for details is actually what Fox Valley Model is doing with theirs. They don't want to raise they're providing these models and providing the detail parts in the box with it, but they're not having them installed up front, which keeps costs down on the model so that everyone can get that model. And then those that want to take the time to install those detail parts, take the time to do it and end up with a super detailed locomotive.
Yeah.
But didn't have to pay through the roof to get it. And it opens up that opportunity to get that specific piece to everyone without it being excluded because, oh, well, we super detailed it. Sorry, we forgot about you middle modelers or lower modelers that don't have the budget. We've super detailed this, so this is what you get. You can either take it or leave it. And it's like that opportunity needs to be there for, we still have to appeal to everyone. People's budgets are not getting larger over time. I think the budgets for model railroads are staying the same for most households to what they are. I don't think an individual's budget grows over time as much as we would want it to.
Right.
So we have to maintain as an industry being able to service any level of income versus only servicing high levels of income.
Yes. Okay. So let me ask you this question, because I've been browsing your website. I would, you know what? Is it okay if I critique it, just one little thing?
Absolutely. I am open for that all the time.
I would think I think you should have an about page.
We have an about page.
Do you? Where is it? I can't find it.
It is, oh, no, we have a contact page. It's on the contact page, I think.
Where's the contact page? I see. Here's what I see. HO scale, N scale, scenery, assembly, tools, DCC, books, clearance, pre-orders, gift cards, and model kits.
Look straight up from model kits.
Should be one row right above that.
I knew that. I was just testing you. Okay, contact. Reach us for any questions. I'd say you could. Okay, I see that now. All right. I wish that was a little easier to find. Yeah, that's one thing I always do when I go to a website. I always look for the about page because it's always interesting to see what people are about. And this is
nice to know.
Yeah, it's a great
nice
story.
To know people.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I think you should expound on you and your father and your story a little bit because it's a great story, and also you want to give that impression of well, not that you don't, but you know that you're easy to access. You have a telephone number here, so is there somebody to answer the phone during business hours?
Most of the time.
All right. So most of the time, but if they send you an email, info@midwestmodelrailroader.com, somebody's going to answer that pretty quick.
Yeah, if they send an email, it goes to my phone, it goes to my father's phone, it goes to my computer, it goes to my father's computer.
Okay.
So yeah, there's generally a much quicker turnaround on email if you can't get somebody on the phone.
Right. And you're going to give me your personal phone number so I can just call you constantly and see what's happening on the Great White Way.
I gave you my personal phone number.
I know. All right, last question. I kept meaning to ask you, and I never got around to it. So I'm looking at HO scale, Atlas, RS11, and it says MSRP $269. You save $85.47. So that's how you do your prices. You do whatever it is you take off. You save $85.47.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the RS11. It'll say the MSRP there, and all of our prices are based on a small markup of what we paid.
Right.
So whatever we pay, we put our small markup on there, which is enough for us to continue to grow the store and make sure you guys get every product gets out in a safe manner. And that's where it is. I know there's some shops that will adjust prices based on popularity of items. I know that we mentioned it earlier. The Spirit of the UP came out, and when I got around to listing mine, there were still a few available that I could find on eBay, where the retailer that I've seen these retailers before, and all of a sudden we're charging $150 when the MSRP is $135.
Right.
Which is really funny because we were selling it for, I think, 89 something on the website. So they're taking, the last thing I want to do is feel like, as a consumer, I would not want to be taken advantage of because of a popularity of an item. So as a retailer, I absolutely don't want the consumer to have that feeling, and I definitely never want that feeling to come from our store.
Right. So you're building your business the exact right way. It's integrity, integrity, integrity. That
is what we try to project at all times, and that's what we try to follow at all times.
I'd say they've done a good job. Wouldn't you, Ron?
I very much would.
Very
much would. I do business with Midwest Model Railroad, and I'm very comfortable to do that. And of course, again, Steve and I got connected in his business, because he sponsored my contest. But it's a business that I am happy to promote on my channel, and I'm not an affiliate. I don't get anything back from that other than he sponsored my contest, which I really appreciate. But I'm happy to push, and not just because Steven and I are friends, but because I also have a very high opinion of their business and the way that they do business. Definitely the kind of place that I like to promote. So absolutely.
Yeah, integrity. All right. We're gonna Steven, we have something called the Kelly questions, which is an intense set of questions that we have our guests answer. It's a separate show. It takes about a half an hour. Do you feel like you're up for that?
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah, they're Ron, they're a fairly intense set of questions, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but the scoring, it's
questionable. Well, this will be your first opportunity to take part in the scoring, and of course, you did the 3-week course.
That's true. I did.
One week was by by correspondence, but the 2 weeks you had to come down to Busted Knuckle and attend the classes.
I got the certificate hanging on the wall.
Yeah. Which will be interesting because Steven spent so much time in university at taking accounting courses.
There you go.
Yeah.
So he'll be able to decipher the scoring immediately.
Exactly. All right. So we have an email address if you want to contact us by email, which is modelerslife@gmail.com. That's modelers with one L, like that's one L like railroad, not two L's like Atwell.
Yes.
Sweet. Oh, I just came up with that off the top of my head. So if I was in a play that you were involved with and all of a sudden somebody lost the line, I could improv. Yeah,
you cover that dead space.
Yeah.
Which happens, I mean, not often, but more often than we would like, and it's always humorous for the entire crew when there's dead space.
Yeah.
Unless it's Sunday night and we're trying to make that last express train.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you know what, Ron? I think he has found another way to describe the podcast. Dead space.
I think you might be right.
Dead space.
Dead space.
Oh my goodness gracious! And we have a website, modelerslife.com. If you go there, there's all kinds of stuff that you can links and stuff like that, and you can see the upcoming shows. For example, on the website for the last 3 or 4 weeks has been the show episode 110, featuring Ron Marsh, which at this moment will be coming out in just over 3.5 hours.
And I'm waiting with bated breath.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Steven, there's one last thing you have to do, and you have to say at the opportune moment, you have to say happy rails to you.
I think I can manage.
All right. Well, Steven, as the sun slowly sets over the back 40, and we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say
happy rails to you.
and Busted Knuckle, guests of a Modeler's Life podcast, stay at the Casa del Sol Motor Court and Inn, where late-night dancing at the Rumba Room is a magical event to be experienced.
It's another Lincoln Homer.